That's original
Yeah.
series. Sorry, go ahead.
So, hello and welcome to the Replimat, a often regular chatcast in which two nerds discuss and watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine in chronological order. Me, Andy, a very well-seasoned traveller, and Tim,
A noob, me, hello.
a very new
Very
first
new.
time. And this week, of course, as you can see, we are joined by Maddie once again. Hello, Maddie.
Hey.
Hey, so today's episode we'll be discussing is Invasive Procedures, which is the fourth episode of season 2. Story by John Wepley, teleplay by John Wepley and Robert Hewitt Wolfe. God, these names. And directed by Les Landau. First transmitted, shockingly, the 18th of October 1993. Gosh, so long ago. Anyway.
Wow.
Before we crack on with that, let's just have our usual wee catch up. And since Maddie, you are a special guest, how are you doing?
Well, first of all, I have to apologize if I sound like a freaking frog because I do have COVID.
Oh yes, it's very early for Maddie.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
also I got woken up by the handsome and dashing young man to my right on the screen, Andy.
Oh, Tim. Yeah, I know.
Or Tim. Tim did not wake me up.
Don't think
But
either
he
of
also
those
would
words
have been
apply to
handsome
me.
and dashing.
Yeah, I
Dashing
definitely
from the
don't
room,
dash
maybe.
anywhere at the moment.
Oh yeah. So I know Andy from doing the Space 1889 series back in the day, and if you know, it's times like he says 1993. I'm like, God, that was at least a decade ago, right? And now I realize my work with Andy was actually a decade ago now. But
Back when I had brown in my beard.
yeah, and back when I had a beard, which is another thing, which is why my Andy's asked me is that in about 4 years ago now I started transition. So yeah, I'm these days I just live completely as a girl, legally and all that stuff. Which that's a whole nother conversation that doesn't have much to
Yes,
do
it
with
is.
science fiction, but every
We've got a
time
whole video about that, of course.
yeah, but what with Dax being sort of a transgender metaphor in some ways, I guess I get called in for this for my expertise. Other than that, done some tie-in writings. Winner of the Writers of the Future Award for emerging talent in science fiction, which is kind of inadvertently. I met Steve Seville through that. Met Andy. And did some tie-in stuff, Europa Universalis, and did one self-published book which is the only publication I have out there under my new pen name, which is Madison Anderson. Threading the Loom. It's available out there on Amazon because everything in the world's available
There's somewhere.
Amazon. And it's completely a transgender metaphor. I mean, a trend, thing. The highwayman gets turned into a cow, and hilarity ensues, and then it kind of turns into a Jane Eyre with magicians story. So it's a limited niche market, but anybody wants to go out there and buy me a pizza, that'd be great. Actually, buy me
a pizza. Pizza's good.
Anyway, that's
as long as you have pineapple on it.
I'm kind of mixed on the pineapple. I love Hawaii. I spent a lot of time in Hawaii with my job, but no, I'm not. I'm not a fundamentalist when it comes to pizza.
Okay.
But if
No
speaking
pineapple.
for America, at least, my day job, I'm an airline pilot for Mumble Airlines. Don't care to go mention it. But I do fly all around the country, and I will say that even though I grew up near Chicago, I hope that I don't lose any Chicago fans here, Andy. But New York pizza still remains the best in our country. So, sorry.
Cool. That's okay. All pizza's
and
good
it doesn't
pizza.
have pineapple on it. Sorry.
Okay, well, maybe not all pizza's good pizza then.
Anyway, yeah, that's me. Now, the much longer resumes of Andy and Tim can be recited. Or does everybody already know?
Yay! And of course, Tim, How have you been?
Well, since we last spoke,
Well, yes.
yeah,
Well, since you went to the toilet, yeah.
our viewer, bless him or her, is going to be start
You're one
getting
viewer.
depressed at my weekly updates of how hard I've been working and how much life I don't have outside of work and family and cleaning out chickens. We found out. I found out because I was cleaning them. Found out last Sunday cleaning out the chickens that we got some red mite, so that wasn't good. So I had to whip
Red
out the
mite?
creosote. Red mite, yeah, just little red mites. They
Oh,
cause harm to the
literally what they
chicken.
are. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Basically, it is what it says on the tin.
on the red mite tin.
So I'm going to have to the red mite tin. Yeah, so I'm going to have to go out there again tomorrow morning and clean them out again, which I would anyway
Again.
on a Sunday morning, and just see if my treatment has worked, or if I've got to take the entire coop apart and paint it all with like wood preserver creosote stuff to try and kill the red mites that are living in it because they cause harm to the chickens. And put them off their laying.
Got to say, pizza sounded nicer.
Yes, it did. Other than that, what else? What else has happened to me this week that's exciting? I've watched a little bit more Robin and Sherwood. I have actually watched a bit more Robin. I'm
Hey,
on to series 3 of
that's
Robin
some
and Sherwood
leisure
now.
time.
So
Yeah.
leisure time, yeah. My leisure time was on washing up and preparing dinner and stuff with Robin and Sherwood on in the background. So there's a difference. Definitely, I'm onto the Jason Connery episodes now,
Ah,
and there's a marked difference
less
between
good
him and
version.
Michael Praed. Well,
Mhm.
that's kind of, I hate to say sort of received wisdom, but that's that's the most common comments tend to see is, oh no, just watch the Michael Praed
Mm.
stuff, not the
Yeah.
Jason Connery. I'm really enjoying. I'm really enjoying these ones because I've noticed that there's a slightly lighter tone to them, or rather, some of the character interaction is slightly lighter. Thought the Michael Praed stuff was very heavy at times.
Right. And in these
Yeah,
hard times, light's good.
indeed. If I'm going for escapism, I like it to be entertaining escapism. Not, I don't want to be traumatized by it. Um, so, um,
That's what Star Trek's for.
well, yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Um,
well, well,
other than that,
sorry,
I've got.
overall kind of positive though. Don't you think?
What's
It's
that?
got a utopian. I was always going to say, and not to interrupt him, but I always found that Star Trek, out of a lot of science fiction, particularly science fiction these days, it's a very uplifting message. It's kind of like, yeah, there's going to be conflict and stuff in the future, but overall, people are good, and overall, we can work together, and
I think
that's
that
good.
was.
Won't be shocked. You know
I
what I
think
mean?
that was basically true of the older series. Certainly, newer Trek, it's much more of a mixed bag.
Okay, I
Much,
consider to
much
me Deep
more.
Space Nine is newer Trek. So I'm sorry. Can I
Oh
still be on
gosh,
this?
no, gosh, it's
Okay.
30 years ago. Remember,
Oh, that's right. It's been a good 13 years.
a decade ago, in the 90s.
Back in the 90s, yes.
We
Um,
wish. We wish.
so
Yeah. Sorry.
that's basically been my week. So yeah. So I hope you've had a slightly more interesting week, Andy.
Not really. I've obviously been working. We've had some really
You
long
can walk.
shifts as well.
Can you walk properly again now? Can you walk
Shall I show
properly
you
again
my?
now? Well, I've got
I
a
will
faint
show you
idea of
my update.
what your leg looks
We do
like.
an update every week of how much better I walk. Okay. I can walk pretty much. Normally now.
For our leg enthusiasts out there, there we are. Hip and leg
Yes, for leg
enthusiasts.
enthusiasts, I'm
Yeah.
less limpy than I was last week.
Well,
So,
less limpy be praised.
I mean,
Is
I'm
it
still wearing a brace. I still wear a brace at work, but that's mostly to stop me from moving too fast accidentally. Because obviously, if I step on the wrong to put pressure on it in the wrong way, it would
right?
just undo everything that's been done in the last few weeks. So having a brace there just reminds me not to move and it restricts the movement, so it just makes it a bit easier. But it's easier to walk without. But obviously, it's work, and work is a lot of movement, a lot of heavy lifting. So you've got to be mindful. And obviously, if the brace was off, I would forget, and then whoosh, and then I'll be back where I was 4 weeks ago, and I don't really want to be doing that.
So you're not
But
you're not
yes,
pulling any exciting
so
dance moves yet.
well, you say this. Yesterday, I was kind of bopping a bit, but nothing like I normally would do, because
Right.
obviously there's only
Okay.
so much I can move at the moment. But
Indeed, with
yeah.
your brace on. Yeah.
Other than work, I've been carrying on with Star Trek Picard. I'm on the third season now, which is
Right.
the better of the three from a nostalgia point of view. Don't know about narratively, but I have issues. In fact, I've had such issues with it watching it that I've decided I'm going to write a book about it.
I'd be
An
disappointed
actual
if you didn't
proper,
have issues.
a nice analysis. I know, right? A nice analysis of the entire 3 seasons and what I think went wrong, what's really good, and why things don't work, but purely from a writing point of view of what's going on here. But you know, that's next year, so I'll have to watch it all again. Yay! Beyond that, I haven't really had time for anything because I've been doing some work in the morning. I have a couple of hours in between work, and then I'm getting home about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and catch an episode of Cellblock H, and then it's like, right, I need to go to bed because dead. So yes, it's been kind of like yours in a sense, but long
Just
week.
more varied.
Long week. Yeah,
Yes.
it's been a long week, but we're all here, so could be worse. We could all be unemployed, lounge, couch potatoes. So
we could be doing
it's
this
not the end of
with
the world.
no views whatsoever.
We could be. We could just be talking to ourselves all week. Yeah,
Exactly.
Which,
yeah.
That does sound like a good idea sometimes, to be fair. But anyway, let us talk about the episode. We'll start with Maddie today as our guest. Usually Tim goes first because Tim's never watched this show either, so it's always a new view. And Maddie has watched it even less than Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like he's starting off with me. It's like all the Star Trek fans are going to wait a second. She hasn't watched anything since Deep Space Nine, and then they'll be like, wait, how many episodes has she watched of Deep Space
2
Nine?
now.
3, but yeah,
3?
I turned the 3rd. Yeah, actually I watched a couple after because I was absolutely delighted by the first one, Dax. It was really fun. Some really cornball acting, but I also
it's the 90s.
Actor, the actor who plays Julian in the first one, if you remember, when he just starts off smarming all over Dax. I'm like,
yeah,
we're supposed to buy this, and so a lot of it is a little over the top. Shall we say?
Tim loves Julian.
Oh yeah.
I actually think in this episode, the actor it comes off as much more likable.
Mm-hmm.
He actually shines in this one. Still not the most assertive guy in the world, but that's okay. Oh my God, the actor who plays Quark is. I mean, is this supposed to be believable? But I think that part of the joke is he's not believable at all.
Quark, right? Absolutely. He's very OTT, and yeah.
Yeah. But he also shines in this episode. He becomes more likable-ish, kind of likable. And we are supposed to like him. He is supposed to be that scamp rogue, right?
Yeah.
He's the lovable rogue.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen that character before, and he plays it. I sometimes think about the stereotypes that we see in 1990s stuff, and like, if there's a whole race of people who are underhanded and they might be likable, but they're always running the deal on the side, and they're all about the money. They would literally, by their own admission, sell out their own brother. There's some uncomfortable anti-Semitic tropes that I don't really like to think about there, but it's not as bad as Star Wars with hook-nosed characters like that either. So, but I would love to go and see a race of people, a race that's like that, and who are absolutely good-looking and beautiful and tall. And
you'd be lucky.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, does every single trader who's a little underhanded have to go and be short, squat with big ears,
Yes.
And bad teeth.
Yes, they do.
So that's just my only critique. But he is a fun character.
It's a Star Trek conceit that, it's not by any means exclusive to Star Trek, but Star
Oh, no,
Trek
all over
certainly
the universe, but yeah.
Star Trek very much goes into the whole monoculture of alien races, which I don't. Yeah, it's I suppose it's meant to be allegory of our various natures, but it's, as you say, not very realistic that this alien culture only has one culture. You know.
Yeah. Well, there is a good point, and I'm trying to remember the minor Klingon character's name who first breaks in, and O'Brien says, "Hey, wait a second! Klingons and humans, we're in the Confederation. We're buddies now, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, not me."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. You know, the Klingon Council, they're a bunch of idiots, weak men and women. You know,
Mm-hmm.
well, they're very egalitarian of them to say weak men and the women. They're also weak. Yeah. So our opening is kind of corny and kind of contrived. It's like we're going to have it where everybody leaves the ship except for all the high-ranking main characters, so we can have it easily taken care of, and also we don't have to have any extras. That we need to
Yeah,
worry
I
about.
did say that to Tim during watching that.
Yeah.
It's a nice way to just get rid of everybody else on the station. It's just the core cast.
As opposed to the original series where we just beam down all high-ranking, high-value characters for an exploration.
Yeah. The entire away team is just the core cast. You're like, so who's actually commanding the ship? Oh, ends in nobody. Okie dokie.
Spock's always up there, you know.
Ensign Redshirt.
Yeah. Ensign Red. At least he's not going to get killed this week if he's on the ship.
No.
Yeah. So, so anyway, yeah. So fun beginning, and then it quickly moves into the actual character development. And Grodd is, again, I mean, I'm going to stop criticizing about some of the campy acting, but
That's
he's
fine.
clear.
We criticize all the time.
Okay, well, no, I mean, you know, I can act, and he is very, and we have a limited amount of time to get some character ideas across. And the first is that he's very unsure, he's very awkward, and that God, I jotted down the character's names. His girlfriend is very protective. Yeah,
Muriel or something.
Muriel, that's it.
Muriel.
And
Muriel the Klingon.
Yeah, Muriel the Klingon. Yeah. And she's very sweet and very protective, and at first I'm like, is this a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing? Because she's got kind of Patricia Hearst written all over her. But then again, you know, it turns out not to be the case. She loves him for himself, and she says, "He saved my life." It's like, well, he didn't actually save your life. He just took you out of that
literally did he?
Especially in a worse one. But so yeah, it's real love, and perhaps fueled by a bit of a mother instinct too. You know, because
he was a very timid character, so yeah.
Yeah, a really timid character. And then, of course, as we know, not to jump way ahead, but when he changes that relationship,
he gets very
yeah. So that's all. It's all a good setup. It's all a good setup because eventually this is about, in a very vague sort of way, change and how that affects our relationships with other people and what we value in other people and what we see them. It's like, is Benjamin still Dax's friend when he's Grodd Dax? And the answer is spoiler. Anyway, so
don't worry about spoilers. If you haven't seen this episode, you should be watching us talk about it.
Well, we know already that, you know, okay, then I'll jump right to the greatest line there is,
drop it down.
Don't call me Benjamin, and he freaking shoots. You know,
don't call me like.
So that was
this friendship's over.
Yeah, you know, I love the actor who plays Cisco is just amazing. You can go see more of him.
Avery Brooks has got a certain presence, doesn't he? A certain energy about him that's very. I don't know how you describe it. He's got, I think, maybe a very stage presence to him in his delivery. It's all. Can you know how Shatner used to get accused of his very over-the-top and dramatic pauses when he's talking? Avery Brooks, who plays Cisco, he can be a lot like that too. but it kind of works for him.
Yeah,
In
I
a way
don't,
that it didn't work for Shatner.
I literally was thinking to myself, if I could redo the original series, I would have him as Kirk.
And now you see why, because they have this real kind of to him.
He is a very strong, commanding presence. He occasionally is, like you said, he's a little bombastic at times, but at the same time, you're like, I'd follow this guy. I'm ex-service myself. I was in the Navy. Not the one,
not Starfleet.
What's that? Yeah, not in Starfleet. No. Actually,
or Space Force.
Not to wander strongly off, but while I've been sick, I've been playing the heck out of Star Wars Squadrons, which is a VR game. And my partner walks in and she's like, God, this looks exactly. I'm in the briefing room getting briefed. She says, "Is this what it was like in the Navy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, actually, this is very much like our briefings in the ready room, except for it wasn't quite so dark with so many robots going around in the background." But there are definitely. So I do actually relate to the whole command structure and the idea of a good skipper can basically save a squadron, and that's essentially what the whole arc of Deep Space Nine is about. A good skipper taking place, a PlayStation, a space station.
Not a PlayStation, no.
I'm sorry. Again, keep in mind I'm both simultaneously sick and blonde, so
the cliches are all true.
Anyway, yeah. So I really like that, and this is an examination. It's kind of almost like somebody did a thought experiment on what the Trill symbiotes are like and what it actually means. And this is something I was thinking about hard in the first episode, because we talked about the first episode being a metaphor for transgender. We have Dax now in the body of a young woman, but the thing is that this one, Jansia is a person in of herself. She is, before she became one with Dax, she was a really cool person who made the 1 out of 10 Trill who could become a symbiote, right?
Yep.
And we kind of, when we talk about Dax, often I think when I've seen Dax discuss on online stuff, it's like, oh yeah, it's like Dax is now a woman. Well, no, that's not actually how it works. It's a symbiote. So there was, Verizon Dax, and now there's Jadzia Dax and Frequency Garage Dax in this one. Every single one of them is a different individual with some core memories and core experiences shared who are space slug. And I wasn't clear in the first episode if they have one consciousness or separated consciousness. And I think the answer in this episode is it's one consciousness.
Well, yeah, because you remember when we did the episode Dax last year when you came on, the whole point of the discussion of the actual episode is the Dax host and indeed or the symbiont and the one person now, are they responsible for the actions of when they were the previous life,
Right.
And of course there was never a absolute bottom line there, whereas this one they're really furthering that discussion.
They are, and again, and we had this discussion a year ago, and I'm sure all your viewers remember every single minute.
All 12 of them, yeah. Okay, Tim, what are your thoughts? Well, Maddie's doing the nose. I was going to say nose job.
It's. I think after obviously we've just had the 3 episodes together as a 3-part story. So this was I think a useful reminder, because we're still early in the second series. So it was a useful kind of way of focusing in the viewers' attention on who the key characters are. by just having stripping the station back of everyone else. It's in some ways I thought it was. I like the conceit. I like the plasma field, plasma cloud, or whatever it was. I know we'd had last with the siege episode, we'd had the station stripped back of crew anyway. So part of me at first did think, I wonder why they didn't plan to have this happen immediately after the other, the last episode. But then potentially that would have the stress on, or you get to a point where you think the stress on the crew, on the cast, it would potentially be too much, having just gone through what they'd gone through with the first story of the second season, to immediately be hit by another another situation like this. You want to think that there's at least some downtime between adventures so that they can recover. So I can kind of understand them doing that. Although I think if you're watching them back to back, it potentially shows up more as of an issue than it should be.
I think I get what you're saying, but
yeah,
someone who watched it way back in the day back to back, because I would have done, because this one and the last one would have been on the same tape.
Yes,
I don't think it was ever a thing, because I mean, I get what you're saying about the siege kind of stripped the station back a bit, but there's so many characters in the story,
Yes.
So this one, there's a very small, tighter cast. Even the guest cast is a lot tighter.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I certainly would never felt that back in the day.
Okay, it's
But,
I think it's a cheap episode. Hi, Maddie. It's I think it's a cheap episode because they've obviously just got the key core cast and then 3 or 4, guest cast. They're using. It's
maybe
like a bottle.
that's why, because the last 3 episodes were one big story, and there was a whole lot of location filming and so on and so on, and a big supporting cast. Whereas this one, they just, as you say, strip back.
It's like
cutting,
it's like what's known as a bottle episode. So they're only using the sets that they've already built for the series. So it's cheap, cheap that way. So it was
4 guest cast, nice, easy, tight.
But it doesn't. I was thinking that just from a sort of a practical perspective, but it didn't. At no point did I think, "Oh, this is a cheap episode," because it was engaging and interesting, and it kept my focus very, very strongly the whole way through. And the whole the way that it investigates in greater depth that the whole Trill symbiont situation was really good as well, because as happened with the episode in the first series, it does it in a way that doesn't feel like laboured or forced. You have a genuine situation that allows for the exploration of those factors and those issues, which is it's educating the characters at the same time as it's educating the audience. It's not something that's been sort of tacked on to another storyline. It's not being shoehorned in. It's strong enough and powerful enough in itself to be its own focus narrative, and there's enough there. By this point, we've got enough of an understanding of the characters and an affection for those characters to care to be as we're carried through with that as well. Even though the main focus of our care and attention is obviously with Jadzia Dax, but you've got the emotional impact on Cisco as well. And also and just watching how he uses that to affect both Verard and Mariel. So he, and so he's got this, and so it's in some ways, I'd say it's easy to overlook the impact on Cisco, or with of what's happening to his old friend.
We see. I think I was going to say this actually when we was watching it, but I was obviously slightly ahead of you because for some reason that's just how these things seem to go. It occurred to me that two things occurred to me. Although it was a Dax episode,
a Daxipode,
a Daxipode, there's very little Jadzia in it. Ironically, she wasn't a huge part of the story, although it was definitely about her. But it was every bit as much a Cisco episode, I think. Like everybody had a good part, all the main cast had a good part to play, but it's very much about. I mean, because I think the first time we did the Dax episode last year, that was very much about what it means to be a Trill, for Dax and for Jadzia. Whereas this one, as Maddie said, is very much about the connections that people have with these characters, and like you say, the change that this thing brings about. Just suddenly you becoming from just being your own identity to suddenly you embracing all these different experiences that you never had before, and all these friendships and relationships. And with Cisco, you get it's very much for Cisco about his relationship with Dax, and seeing how the radically just changed now because of this new aspect. Which Maddie, a question I have for you, because you remember the first time we did the Dax episode, there was a lot of, as you, to use a phrase, transcoding in it. Some subtle, some, and I seem to recall you said that it was actually surprisingly really well done and a lot more applicable than you expected. How do you see it this time around? Because obviously it's a very different kind of story they're telling now, as they're revealing more of it.
But so let's just say that transition is not always easy on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean between, romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Although my partner and I, we were engaged when I came out, coming up on 3 years ago now. And she has stayed with me, and I've stayed with her. And that's as changes happen. And I think what a lot of people who are transgender and don't know transgender people don't quite understand, and sometimes transgender people, especially when they start transition, don't understand, is that it does change you. It really does. You think like, oh, okay, well, I've always had this slug inside me, and now I'm just going to let people know about the slug. That's not quite how gender dysphoria works, but let's go with it. And, like, okay, fine, I can finally be myself in public. It's a lot more than throwing on a girl suit in my case, and or in the case of trans males, I'm sure, but I'll always speak for transgender women and only speak for one in particular, who's me. But it does change you. It does change how you act, how you perceive. And last night we had an excellent conversation. We're sitting on the couch watching this, me and my partner. And I asked her, I'm like, so have I changed? And she's like, oh, yeah. I love you, but you're a different person. I love the person you were, and I love the person you are. And that was great, guys. Oh, God. Not gonna, but this one provoked a good conversation between us. But I'll say also, it's not just us. It's with everyone I know, friends I've known from before. And, a lot of my male friends, for example, how they reacted to me at first. People are like, "Hey, dude," and it's not like as easy as space like either, because there's this transitional period where it's very awkward for the first year, 2 years, where you don't look the part, as it were. And so it's harder for people to react to you as you are not perceiving yourself. And now it's like, people, my friends will treat me in a certain way that's different now than they used to treat me. And that's because I'm a different person. It's not just because, oh, you're a girl now, I'll hold the door open for you, kind of thing. They kind of recognize that, oh yeah, things that, how we used to interact. And I also learned, as my partner once told me, I said, remember, she was talking about a friend of mine, remember, you transitioned, he didn't. He's still a guy. You can't expect him to be other than uncomfortable sometimes when you bring up stuff. And I'm like, oh. I'm sorry, this is just word salad at this point.
No. I think you're right, because I remember another friend of mine who went through, not transition as such, but certainly went from presenting as a woman to being non-binary, and we had a whole conversation which didn't quite go as well as some, where I tried to explain, it's like, yes, I know this is important to you, but as you just said, you're the one who's going through the changes, but everybody else is still the same, so you can't expect them to just openly and easily just say, they've got to take time to adjust as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've lost friends, but I've also gained friends, or come closer to some other friends. And sometimes I found that some friends I'd lose and then they'd come back afterwards, and it was almost like they had to kind of like, and then they could come back and.
They had to separate themselves to get their head into the right lane, I suppose.
Okay, now I'm going to accept this person, Madison, that I know now. And that was important, and I think we'll see this in Deep Space Nine periodically. So people who knew the old Dax they want to just go up to Jadzia and treat her like she's the old Dax, and she remembers them, she loves them, she shares their memories, but I mean, she shares them.
You saying that makes me think there's an episode coming up in season 4, so that's probably about 2 years' time for us, which is very much about that. So I'm definitely going to get you back for that. But there's an episode later this season which somebody wanted to guest spot on, but I'm thinking I might get you back for that too, which again really goes into the whole people who knew her before, and they absolutely straight away just boom, doesn't bother them.
But there's a bit of that in the. Really was it in the pilot where Cisco was encountering Jadzia Dax for the first time, and so you had some really awkward scenes where
because he just wasn't too sure how to he wasn't sure how to respond to it at all, was he?
Yeah, exactly, and coming up with these old memories of like shared experiences and stuff, and I trying in a kind of what seemed like quite a clumsy way, I think, to try and work out himself. We were watching him trying to work out himself how he could relate to Jadzia Dax, and what how much of
it was clumsy,
Dax was still there, and so what banter could be shared, what experiences could be recalled and laughed over or whatever. And
although you say it was clumsy, I think it was deliberately clumsy because I think in reality, I think that is the truth, because not even just from a transitioning point of view, just a general, when your perspective of somebody else changes for whatever reason, because it doesn't always have to be a trans thing, it could just be literally the way you suddenly view them has changed because of a new experience, or you suddenly fancy them or something like that when you never before. Suddenly it becomes very clumsy and awkward, but you could suddenly, all the normal ease that you had with them, it's still there, but in your head it's not, and suddenly you just don't know what to do and how to. So I think maybe that was deliberately. I assume deliberate, at least on Avery Brooks's part.
Well, possibly. I mean, because it was at the beginning of the series, they were also feeling their way into the characters as well. So that's I think that there's
an element of that.
Yeah.
So if I can ask a personal question, Andy, what age were you when you came out?
Me.
And by the way,
obviously me, not Tim. Obviously, duh.
Yeah. I said Andy at the start of it.
You did. Sorry.
Yeah. By the way, for any good-looking gay men at home, Andy is also. And just, I mean, check
I'm
out.
not. Who knew? And if
Yeah,
you
I
don't,
know.
and if you're local, I'm on Grinder. Keep try and find me.
And as the
They
weeks
help you
go
out,
by,
mate.
he gets less and less limp.
I'm on Grinder. Look. Hang 1 second.
We don't
You
need
know,
to see
since we're advertising here, if you're local, see, I'm there. See, decent picture. Yeah, it's actually the same picture I have on my Facebook and Twitter and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So, decent.
yeah.
Yeah, find me because we're all looking for love. When did I come out? It was a long process. You know, I I didn't actually really embrace it or accept it really until 2001. So I would have been like 29 almost, which you know is quite a time. Really, it took me a while to embrace it and accept it. But as I always say, and I've said this countless times to people, that looking back, there's so many obvious clues and moments when I absolutely knew, but because of the culture of the 60s, I don't think the 70s and 80s. Yeah, right. I don't
But
think
you
I'm
just
that old.
lost a whole bunch of grinder hits on that one, buddy.
No. 70s less though, because I was obviously in the 70s. It's only the first 8 years of my life, so it wasn't a huge chunk. I was a kid, so you don't really. Certainly back then, it really wasn't a thing you really thought about much. But in the 80s and 90s, there are so many instances I look back on, and I'm like, kind of obvious, right? And I think many times, there's many instances where I look back and it's like, well, I knew at the time. But for various reasons, you just bury that crap down because culture, society, people whatever reason there is. But it took me until, let's say, 2001. And that was actually pretty much because the internet was booming at last. And on what is now called Gallifrey Base, back then the day was Outpost Gallifrey, which is a Doctor Who message board community. What's it? I say community. It's more like people just absolutely being nasty to each other these days. I developed quite a few friends through it. I say friends in that sense only because obviously the internet friends, and that doesn't always translate to real world sometimes. And the not the anonymity, I suppose, of it, because I was just, I mean, yeah, there's a picture of me, my name, whatever, or a handle, whatever it would have been at the time. It kind of creates that safe zone where you can sort of express yourself in ways you can't with people you know. The first person I actually told, who for Tim, is the person who is the model for Bill Bishop, one of the characters from the Leopard Stewart books. When I told him, he's like, "Okay, cool." That was it, and it's pretty much been like that, pretty much my entire life since then. Anybody I was told, because I mean, Tim's met me. Obviously, Maddie, you've known me for quite a while as well. I'm not. When you meet me in person, I don't necessarily come across as what would you call a stereotypical gay, But when you get to know me and when you realize, then you're like, oh yeah, I can see it now. By the way I talk, the conversations I have, and how little I care that people know. But at the same time, I think when you broadcast it, it's a lot of visual cues. And if it doesn't fit into the stereotype, people sort of don't see it sometimes. So that was a long answer.
Well, and to say I can relate is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah.
Transitioning is a little bit longer process than just setting up a grinder account. Mm-hmm. But I'm teasing Andy. I know this is harder than that. But so for me, I delayed for probably a good decade after you. But the reason I brought it up with you, Andy, is that because it's not just this transition; it's how people perceive you, and for right or wrong, people perceive you as different if you're gay than if you are straight, and they have their own.
Well, you have you have your own ideas of what such a thing means.
Yeah, especially if they aren't gay or LGBT, because let me tell you, especially as a transgender woman, it's amazing the number of people who are cisgender straight and haven't met anybody who's transgender before in their lives, and then they're like, okay, but so all you guys do this, or you're like, and what you need to do is, and isn't that a problem? And I'm like, can you give me my 39 years of lived experience here?
Yeah,
Um,
we're
you
not a
know,
monoculture.
we're not in my culture. We're not all Klingons, okay?
Yeah.
It's
It's funny you say this because,
you know,
I mean, this is still connected to the episode, viewers.
yeah, we are, aren't we? We
Yeah.
really wanted off, didn't we? Sorry.
We're inspired by Dax's experiences this week.
You can be our
When you're just
co-host.
talking about how people react when they know you're gay or trans or whatever, I get that works still today. Like, no one gives a crap because I don't care, so why do they care, sort of thing. But every now and then we'll make a joke. We was playing pool. I forget what is it they said. Something about sometimes you just got to take the straight shot or something. I forget. I'm like, oh, not me, mate. No, I don't go for another straight shots, nothing. And the guy who was with me from work, he just looked at me. He's like, "Fuck's sake, Andy," because he knew every time somebody makes some kind of straight gay kind of gag, I will jump on it and make a proper sarcastic comment. And he knows, he's like, "Oh God, I knew you was going to say something," because I don't care,
Yeah.
But and they still. I get, as I said, I get at work all the time where they'll say something, so I'll just respond back in a sarcastic kind of when they're like actually yesterday was a good one. M&M's, peanut M&M's, simple, straightforward, right? And I was chatting to one of the guys there. He had a few alpha, and he's like, "I'm not a huge fan of nuts," he says, "but sometimes I goes, oh, whereas me, I goes, obviously, I'm all for the nuts, right?" And he just like, oh, "Fuck's sake," because you have to,
Did he do the exact expression Tim has right now? I
No, he
saw
thought.
the forehead go like this,
No, well,
going,
kind of. He
I
sort of
know
looked
this
at
is
me. He sort of
I
looked at me
know.
like this. He's like, because he knew. It's like,
It'll be
Jesus,
what our
Andy.
viewers
It's
doing
like,
as well.
what?
Sorry, viewer. More,
Well, it's
more
funny
nuts,
because, like I
gags.
Well,
said,
we can
if
look
it,
at this afterwards, right? It doesn't have to be like a half-hour LGBT discussion, right?
No,
well, it's
it's
funny
not
My
though
going
point
in.
because,
is,
It's all good stuff.
okay,
as I said, when they make those sort of comments,
yeah,
it's funny. It's but as soon as I make it, they're like, oh, and I'm like, well, what's the difference? If you can make gags like that, then so can I. But of course, being the only gay in the village, I think sometimes they forget. Like another really funny one.
yeah. No, there's no other gay person around except for
Where I'm
Andy.
working, there's one trans. There's probably
Really?
gay people because there's gay people everywhere. I think there's quite a few there who aren't out or even aware they are yet, but that's a whole nother
Yeah.
story. But there's one guy, the lads were clowning around as they do, and he was just leaning over, like shaking his booty hair, thinking it's funny. And I was walking towards him, and he's like, "Oh shit, shit! Oh, I thought you were
Like,
somebody else coming up. Oh shit, no, Andy, I." I'm like, dude, I don't care. Because he thought it was one of the other lads where he's just having a laddish thing. And then when he realizes me, he's like, "Oh no, shit, no, Andy, I didn't mean. Oh no, no, no." And I'm like, "Dude, I took it exactly the same way all the other lads would have taken it. It didn't. But it's perspective, as you say. Perception. It's all these things. It's fun. Gotta have a laugh,
yeah.
right?
So, my point that about 20 minutes ago that I had was it's not just physical transitioning that it changes how
It's
people perceive
mental,
you.
emotional.
Right.
Yeah.
And a huge part of this episode is it's not just that there's Jancy and this young woman, and now it's this middle-aged-ish looking guy, Barad. That's not it. It's an actual personality change.
Mm-hmm.
And, spoilers, Barad is not Cisco's friend.
No, by the end of it, Cisco's like,
Yeah.
nah.
He says it explicitly and then shoots him in the
Very.
face.
But what I like is you can see, because John
Yeah.
Glover is a really good actor, his facial expressions when Cisco goes, "This friendship's over," you can see it hurt. It hurt him because there's still part of that old self there.
Yeah.
Even though this slightly shifted personality is sort of more dominant, the old self and the emotions of that are still there. And boy, he felt that, and you're like, that hurt. And it should.
Just like you could see
Well, sort of
when he had the Dax symbiont inside him, you could see the way that Verard changed. The way, like you said at the beginning, Maddie, how he was quite timid, very much kind of sort of cowering behind the Klingons as they came in, and that's probably why the Klingons are a good race to use as his muscle, as it were, because they're so aggressive and sort of dominant when they come into the room, and so he was kind of hiding back, and once he's got the symbiont in him, suddenly he's shoulders back, sort of chest raised, kind of confident bearing, as if he's kind of not. You can't. I was going to say as if he's come into himself, but that's not right, because he's. Because it's a different. It's expressing himself as a changed person. So it's not like he's achieved his kind of end goal, as it were. He's changed fundamentally, and it's and that and of course then that is acknowledged by Cisco, and that's what Cisco uses to change or to plant the doubt in Muriel about how Verard's going to be going forward, and the way that all kind of plays out as well. And I thought that was very well portrayed by John Glover. The just the variety between the two versions of Verard that we saw in this episode.
But it wasn't just Cisco that saw. I mean, Muriel, she's. I mean, that's why Cisco was able to latch on to her insecurities, because she could see it straight away. She saw, this is not the man I knew anymore. This is not a person I knew. He's now a new person. There's aspects, but fundamentally, like you say, he's now somebody else, and I don't know how to relate anymore.
Yeah, and despite the fact that he says, he tries to sort of treat her the same. It's impossible for him to do that. It's impossible for him to relate to her in the same way, because of everything else that he's taken on through the Dax symbiont. So he cannot possibly relate to her in the same, or anyone in the same way.
Very true. In a sense, I feel that he's like almost broad Dax. It's almost like saying, I don't need my old friends anymore. I don't, I'm in charge now, and I'm going to be Benjamin's friend. Benjamin's my friend, right?
Benjamin's like, no, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, he what?
I said, Benjamin's like, no, you're not. Yeah.
But Barad's like, hey, we'll go over, we'll talk about old times, and and he Barad very much wants to be Barad Dax. I mean, obviously, that's the whole point of this episode. Yeah. And to the extent that he's like, okay, I'm in my new world now, and I don't really want my old world, which includes Marissa. He's pretty dismissive of her, and she knows he's gonna ghost her big time.
Absolutely.
Smart lady. And
absolutely.
He does that to her. She still wants to be with him at the end when after he loses Dax.
Well, clearly, Muriel, like most people, she obviously wants to be needed too. And, that's presumably why she latched onto him in the first place, because, like we said, he was a very timid, reserved, and she could mother him, and she was needed. And now suddenly she's not needed at all, because he's, as you say, Tim, not come into himself, found himself, but he's become this different person now.
Strong enough to stand on his own 2 feet without someone to hold his hand.
What do I do now? But that's all she's got, so she keeps trying. Which, like we said earlier, that's very allegorical of the whole, not just trans, but LGBT or anything, massive change of your life. People who are such a big part of that life in some way or another suddenly they have to find a new way to play, a new way to fit as well. And sometimes, like you said, Maddie, they do. Sometimes they have to step back for a little bit and then come back and say, right, now I know what I can do, where I fit. And some, unfortunately, just can't. Not through the fault of the person who's changed necessarily, but just because things have changed. And like you said, this is very much about everything's changed. And now it's all these people trying to how do we fit together now? Do we fit together?
As I said, I've lost friends, and not always in the way when you hear that, especially for trans folk, because there's quite a bit of prejudice, even compared to other LGBT people. So the stereotype is, you come out and like, oh, I can't deal with you because you're gay. I can't deal with you because you're trans. I can't deal with you because you secretly write science fiction. That's a hard one.
You write that rubbish?
Really? The next thing is like, so you're going to quit the day job? I'm like, airline pilot. I'm not quitting the day job for that. For that huge bonus Amazon check. And I think we've all had points in our lives, maybe not so dramatic, where you're like, okay, I'm not really the same person. I'm not in the same group of people. We don't do the same things together. And that old friends, even if they're kind of local, you just don't see them that much anymore. And they act differently. And maybe when you meet up with them, you talk about old times, but it's not anything that you're going to restart. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense. It does make sense to me, and the way I the way I can relate to that as I suppose as a straight male is when I went away to university, and sort of experienced aspects of life that I hadn't experienced before, and made new friends from completely different places, with different life experiences themselves, and I grew up a lot in a very short space of time, and then when I went home and saw my old school friends again, there was very much it was very much a case of I found it difficult to relate to them in the same way anymore, because we were certainly having very different life experiences. So and there are some that have stayed with me, and I still value very much, and they are still part of my life, and a lot that over the years have just we've gone separate ways, and that's it. And there wasn't any point in trying to force the situation, because for the sake of some shared teenage experiences, back at school and stuff. It's it's kind of knowing where the value is in where to what to really cling on to, and what to willingly let go. And so that's kind of the only way that I can really relate.
Yeah.
If if at all.
It's interesting though, isn't it, that we say transition or coming out or whatever, it's this massive change. But like Tim just said, that's just life for everybody. We all move on, we all change, because we do. We're always changing every day. We're never the same person today that we were yesterday on some level. Hopefully, because if we are, then we've got a problem. And then people come and go out of your life, and suddenly they don't know where to fit, because you have become not necessarily a new person, but certainly changed enough. I think that's true for everybody on some level. So yeah, if that made sense.
Yeah. I mean, and again, speaking from the trans point of view, which, again, there is some metaphors here. The thing about transitioning is it's quite dramatic, and there's also a very physical opposite thing that you can observe. It's like there's something different about that person. Maybe it's the longer hair, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the but so people obviously have something to hang on that difference, but yet so many of us change, even though there's no overt physical thing.
Yeah.
You don't. For the Trill, of course, you literally look like somebody completely different. But we all change. And
we do. Right. I'm going to say let's wrap it up around about now, because I know Tim's got to go and bake. No, it's fine. There's 3 people talking. Obviously, there is no way it was not going to be a longer episode. But Tim does have to go and bake his potatoes because it's Saturday. Yeah, yes, and this is what he does on Saturday. He's got to go and bake his potatoes for his boys.
Red mite. I used to have
yes, I've got to fight the red mites tomorrow.
Fight the red mites, yeah. So that was us discussing, in part, the episode Invasive Procedures and issues surrounding it, really, and indeed how they reflect on real life. But there's clearly much more of a discussion to be had here. So, Maddie, I'm definitely going to invite you back in a few months when we reach Blood Oath, I think it's called, which is the next big Dax episode, which I think will definitely help continue this conversation. It looks to me that Dax usually has at least one good big episode that deals with her identity a season, so this conversation can carry on over the course of a few years. I keep blurring out focus here. There we go. And we'll continue this conversation.
Me waking up. Sorry.
Nah, that's fine. It's fine. Because Maddie, of course, what time is it for you over there?
Oh, God. It's like coming up on 8:20 a.m.
8 a.m. Yeah. That's what time I got up this morning. Gosh. But over here, it's 20 past 4.
20 past 4.
So it's a bit of a difference.
20 minutes late getting me spuds in.
Yeah. So, thanks for watching again, as ever, people. Thank you, Maddie, for joining this conversation. It's been quite fascinating. It's been quite in the British way of saying that, because that usually means really. Quite in America tends to be less for some reason. Quite usually means more.
And semiotics is so hard.
Yeah,
I'd say very.
Very. It's been very interesting.
It's been fascinating.
It's been fascinating, as Spock would say. Not that Spock's in this yet. No, he's not. Or is he? So, yes. In the meantime, we are all on various social medias. Maddie, where can people find you?
You can find me if you send up a smoke signal. I'll swing by and
I'll see it eventually. Yeah. Get a plane to fly out and just put the name behind on a banner.
I'll tell you what, Madison Anderson, Amazon, Threading the Loom is my last work that I published.
There we go. Well, that's one certain. As I say, you can find the rest of us, me and Tim, or Tim and I, on the Replimat 1 for Twitter. Tim is, of course, Mr. _Brell on Twitter.
Yep. On Twitter, Mr. _Brell.
Yep, and on Instagram, it's just Mr. Brell.
Indeed, BRELL.
Threads, it's Mr. Brell.
BRELL.
And me, you can find me as, well, Andy Frankhamallen, because I am, if nothing else, consistent, I guess, on that one thing at least. The rest of it, less so. But anyway, once again, thank you all for partaking. Thank you to our wonderful multiple viewers. And thank you, Maddie, for taking part. It's been fascinating.
It has.
Until next time, I've been Andy.
I've been Tim.
Oh, Maddie. Sorry.
I don't know what we're doing.
I'm sorry. Look, guys, I'm still working on my first cup of coffee, all right?
Anyway, until next time. Bye-bye, Duggan.